The executive elevator at Manhattan Business Tower almost never stopped on the 25th floor at 3 a.m. But that night, James Washington, the night janitor who had walked those halls for 15 years, found himself staring through the tinted glass of a boardroom at a scene he would never forget. Victoria Sterling, the formidable CEO whose name carried weight on Wall Street, collapsed across a polished mahogany table that probably cost more than James earned in a year. Her face twisted in pain, her left arm dangled uselessly, and when she tried to speak into her phone, the words spilled out garbled and broken. James knew immediately what was happening. It wasn't exhaustion or stress. It was a stroke. Most janitors wouldn't have recognized the signs. But James wasn't most janitors. His late wife Dorothy had been a neurology nurse for 20 years. Over dinners, she had turned their kitchen into a classroom, drilling him on symptoms, teaching him what to do when seconds mattered. "Knowledge saves lives, Jammy," she always said. "And it doesn't matter who you are when the moment comes. You act." For a split second, James hesitated. Victoria Sterling was untouchable, the kind of executive who barely noticed him in passing, whose world existed far above his own. But Dorothy's voice in his memory cut through the doubt. He opened the boardroom door, calm and steady. "Miss Sterling, you're having a stroke. Don't try to talk. Just listen to me." She tried to protest, panic rising as her body betrayed her. James already had 9/11 on the line, rattling off symptoms with the precision of a trained medic. Female patient, mid-40s, classic stroke presentation, facial droop, left-sided weakness, slurred speech, onset within 5 minutes. The dispatcher was taken aback at the accuracy from a janitor, but James kept going, positioning Victoria to minimize further damage until the paramedics arrived. They found her stabilized, symptoms clearly documented. One paramedic muttered to another, "This guy knows more about neurology than half the nurses I know." By dawn, Victoria was in the hospital, and James was back pushing his cart, invisible as ever. He thought the night would fade into memory. He didn't realize it had set into motion a chain of events that would change not only his life, but the future of the entire corporation. The next morning, a note waited on his locker. Formal warning, inappropriate use of executive elevator, unauthorized access after hours. Signed by Wilson Carter, the security manager known for bullying subordinates and flaunting his minor authority. James folded the paper carefully. 15 spotless years, never a single complaint, and now this for saving the CEO's life. But what bothered him wasn't the reprimand, it was how fast Carter knew about what had happened. The paramedics had no reason to report details, and the hospital would never share confidential medical information. Someone was watching Victoria very closely. As he cleaned that day, James noticed Dr. Patterson, Sterling's personal physician, arriving late, looking uncharacteristically anxious. Through the glass, James caught sight of Patterson arguing with Carter. His late wife's voice rang in his memory. "When symptoms appear suddenly in executives, don't just ask why now. Ask, who benefits?" Until then, James had assumed the stroke was natural, the product of stress and sleepless nights. But watching Patterson's panic planted a seed of doubt. Competent doctors celebrated when patients survived. They didn't look terrified. That afternoon, Victoria called James to her office. Pale but recovering, she thanked him for saving her life. "The paramedics said you knew exactly what to do," she said, studying him with curiosity. "Where did you learn all that?" James hesitated, speaking softly about Dorothy, the nurse who had taught him everything, and about her death in an accident 5 years earlier. Victoria's tone shifted. "James, tell me honestly, did my symptoms seem natural to you?" The question startled him. A CEO asking a janitor for a medical opinion? But her urgency was unmistakable. He replied carefully that strokes at her age rarely happened without warning signs. "Had you noticed anything before yesterday?" Her face froze. She admitted she'd been experiencing headaches, dizziness, even episodes of confusion, but Patterson had waved it off as stress. James kept his face neutral, but inside, Dorothy's alarms were screaming. A competent neurologist would have ordered tests immediately. Ignoring such symptoms wasn't incompetence, it was negligence, or worse. As James left, Carter lingered in the hallway, watching him with a thin smile that was anything but friendly. The message was clear. You're being watched. For weeks afterward, James returned to his invisibility, cleaning offices while observing everything. What he discovered chilled him. Patterson visited Carter's office regularly, carrying a brown medical case. One night, James accidentally overheard their conversation. "The tests show deterioration," Patterson whispered, "but I've kept the reports within normal limits." "Good," Carter replied. "How long?" 6 months at most. The medication, disguised as vitamins, will trigger the next episode. That one should finish the job. James gripped his cart to steady himself. They weren't just negligent, they were actively poisoning her. The missing piece came from Marcus Johnson, a maintenance tech and Afghanistan veteran. Marcus had overheard Carter boasting about Sterling Industries' stock purchases before upcoming leadership changes. When James explained what he had pieced together, the stroke, the poisoning, the stock manipulation, Marcus's military instincts recognized it instantly. "That's attempted murder and financial fraud, but we'll need proof." Together, they built a plan. Marcus installed hidden cameras and microphones in Patterson and Carter's offices. Within days, the recordings confirmed everything: the poison disguised as supplements, the forged medical reports, the plan to cash in once Victoria collapsed permanently. James thought of Dorothy's words: "Knowledge without action is complicity." He knew what had to be done. The evidence mounted: 92 hours of recordings, 15 falsified medical reports, 341 suspicious stock trades tied to Victoria's medical episodes. Marcus's old military contacts helped analyze the data, creating an airtight case. But James wanted more than arrests. He wanted Carter and Patterson to understand, in the most humiliating way possible, that the ignorant janitor they had mocked had outsmarted them completely. At the next board meeting, while executives droned on about quarterly profits, James quietly left an envelope on Victoria's papers. Inside was one line: "The vitamins you're taking aren't vitamins. Check the bottle. Someone who cares." She read it, masked her reaction, and later confronted Patterson directly, dangling the envelope and supplements in front of him. When she suggested independent testing, he panicked, tried to dissuade her. Exactly the wrong move. "In 15 years as CEO," she told him coldly, "I've learned that when someone tells me not to verify, that's when I must." Meanwhile, Marcus delivered the evidence to the FBI, the SEC, the medical board, and the press. That Friday, James met Victoria privately and laid out the full truth. Every recording, every forged report, every fraudulent stock purchase. She listened silently, fury hardening her expression. "James," she said at last, "you saved my life 3 times, once from a stroke, once from poison, and once from betrayal." The following morning, Carter walked into what he thought was a routine meeting. Instead, he was greeted by Victoria and a squad of federal agents. As the FBI read him his rights, his composure cracked. Patterson was arrested simultaneously, caught trying to erase files. By Monday, the Chicago Tribune ran the headline: "Janitor exposes corporate murder plot, saves CEO's life." The nation was riveted by the story of a working-class black man whose hard-earned knowledge had toppled a conspiracy at the heart of corporate power. And then came the twist no one expected. At a press conference, Victoria publicly honored James. "Competence, integrity, and intelligence don't depend on degrees or social status," she declared. "They depend on character, and James Washington has more than enough." She announced his promotion to Director of Corporate Safety and Integrity, with a 6-figure salary. Carter and Patterson watched the announcement from custody, humiliated by the man they had dismissed as irrelevant. Carter was sentenced to 25 years in prison, stripped of his assets. Patterson lost his license and was banned from practicing medicine. Meanwhile, James moved into his new office on the 26th floor, overlooking Chicago. His sign read, Director of Security and Corporate Integrity. Marcus joined him as head of electronic security. Together, they implemented protocols that became industry models. But James's proudest achievement wasn't his new office or his salary. It was the scholarship fund Victoria created in Dorothy's name, sending low-income students into medical fields Dorothy had loved. Dozens of children of janitors, guards, and laborers were now studying neurology and emergency medicine, carrying forward her legacy. 6 months later, James was invited to testify before Congress about corporate medical reform. His story had become case study material in medical schools and business ethics courses. But what mattered most were the letters from ordinary people, workers who said his story inspired them to trust their knowledge, speak up against injustice, and believe their worth wasn't